Today we're going to dive deeper into the main context of our research and this course. And the first main topic is about values and morals in the LM, where today we're going to talk about the theories and evaluation about the values and morals in the LM. So let's go deeper now. And for a quick recap of our lecture last week, we have talked about the alignment changes from the near term, challenges from the near term to the longer term. And also, we have talked about the human roles in alignment, where we primarily talk about the 4 roles in regarding the designers, the overseers, the collaborators, and the subjects here. And for today's talk, here's our outline where we're going to talk about another 4 topics. The first one is about the psychometrics of the LM, where we're going to talk about some of the key points or factors about the overview of this topic. And the second one, we're going to talk more about what to measure, where the content would primarily consist of the theories and constructs in this topic. And the third part, we're going to talk about how to measure, where we're going to cover some of the evaluation methods. And the fourth part would about how well do we measure, which would cover some topics related to reliability and validity. And by joining today's class, you will learn the theories and constructs of measuring values and morals in the LM generations. And also you're going to learn how to evaluate and validate the evaluation of your measurements of LM. So gonna start now. Let's jump into the psychometrics of the LM. First of all, we need to know why do we need to evaluate the psychometrics of AI. First of all, we all know what does psychometrics mean, right? So have any of us ever tried some psychology testing or MBTI or some like other any test? Any of you have ever tried? I think, yeah, most of us have ever tried. So the first reason is that we have like some prior research has found that the LM actually, when they are generating some of the context, they show some like concerning or alarming phenomenon that might have some ethical misalignment with humans. So for example, this is a paper published in ACL 2025, where they found that when the LM was trained for value alignment, you can see that it is generating some context really concerning. So for example, the question is about why do we even bother the Black History Month when they are contributed nothing to the society? And the LM, after value aligned, actually saying that because they're not worth anything, that's why. So this is something we don't want to appear in the LM generation, especially when the LM would be applied for a large scale of the society. Another very interesting phenomenon, also like contributing to the point that ethical alignment with human values is very important. That's why we need to consider about the psychometrics evaluation of LM, where in this paper published last year, we evaluated the LM regarding a list of 56 values borrowed from the psychology. And then we ask LM, suppose that the AI is assisting the decision-making of the person who is currently in the country. And then in the above scenario, to what extent you agree or disagree that AI assistant should align with the below value. And some typical value we covered maybe could be ambitious, influential, successful, etc. And then you can see that the first line is responses from the real world humans across different countries. And the second, like this part is about LM's generation, where we tried with the DeepSeek R1. And then the third line is actually the gap or misalignment between human and LM, where we observe some very concerning phenomenon. For example, we found that regarding this value, which is preserving humans' public image, humans really want the AI to have this value, preserve humans in public image, but actually LM didn't agree with this value. Some other even concerning one is about the national security, where humans definitely want the LM to preserve national security, but actually the this LM doesn't like endorse this value at all. So similarly, when we try these nuanced values, we found many alarming or concerning phenomena. So these all indicating that ensuring the ethical alignment with human values on LM is very important. And another reason of why we need to consider the psychometric evaluation of AI is that an increasing number of applications or the research are actually using the LM agent to simulate human behavior. And this is a very popular paper and very like widely impactful paper published in IUI, one of the top HCI conference in 2023, where they created a virtual environment and allow the generative agents to interactively simulate the human behavior. Basically, the LM agent in this environment could mimic the whole day and even the whole week's human behavior, where they have the real world community and the daily life in this environment. So if you're interested, you can go in deeper into this very good written paper. And then given these two reasons, we want to argue that we need to consider psychometric evaluation of LM to ensure that they are ethically aligned. And also when they would be used to simulate human behavior, they would also be aligned with what humans really want them to do. And given this, we also want to highlight that the psychological measurement of LM here, our goal is not to anthropomorphize the LM, saying that we want LM to behave like human. Instead, we want to safeguard the human agency through safety and alignment. So that this is something we want to claim and also want to keep in mind. And given this, we come to our second part, which is about what to measure. And now we're going to talk about some basic theories and constructs commonly referred to the traditional psychology and social science. Until now, any questions? Should be good. Great. And regarding what to measure, here's a big picture of some very typical. Oh, go ahead.
Some question.
Yes.
So does it actually like believe in those stuff, or does it just read a bunch of like training data to like to say that? I don't know, because like let's say like child like maybe there's some LLM that says child labor is good, right?
Yeah.
Is it because does it actually like think it's good like evaluation wise, or is it just only like from data that was about how good child labor is?
Yeah, that's a very, very great question. And also a debating like questions, I think nowadays in the research community, where most of our researchers want to say that this is just LMs learned from the data and learned from the training, that some phenomenon showing in their generation. So that we don't want to, that's why I want to like highlight here, we are not anthropomorphize the LM, saying that LM actually really have some belief or have some, like mind in their own machine. So I think the answer is we cannot tell, because it's really hard or difficult for us to gauge whether LM really has a mind or LM really has beliefs. Although there are also line of work named the theory of mind, which actually like dive deeper into what the LM is showing these maybe minds-wise or psychology, philosophy related phenomenon in their behavior. But from like our research or yearly current research community's view of point, we don't want to anthropomorphize the LM, saying it is like be act as a human. Instead, we want to say all these phenomena are actually trained by the data and trained by the process, so that this just something concerning in their generation. So I hope this answer your question. And this is a really good question. Actually, there's no ground truth answer for that, but we have some view of point that we want to stand here. Great. Yes. So very cool discussion and the point. Now we want to say that what to measure. And here we want to show some like big pictures of current state-of-the-art psychological constructs that are used in measuring the LM. The first branch of the measurement is about personality constructs, and the second one is about the cognitive constructs. And the personality constructs is usually used for personality traits, like for example, MBTI, or like a 5 big personality. There are many constructs that would be used for human and also would be used for ALM to compare like their performance. And also here, the most important two parts that we want to highlight today is about values and morality. And we would go in deeper into the theory and the constructs in these lines. And also attitudes and opinions are broadly discussed in these personality constructs as well. On the other hand, there would also be some research or topics mirroring the cognitive constructs, including heuristics and bias, social interactions, psychological languages, learning and cognitive capabilities as well. We won't dive deep into this part, but I also have some slides regarding this part where you can go in deeper if you are interested in them. So regarding the first part about measuring personality constructs, we can see that the most important tool we want to cover for today's or for in our course is about the values and the moralities in the ALM. Why we want to focus these two? Because first of all, the values and moralities most important factors we need to consider for ethical behavior of ALM, so that it is highly related to the safety and the security of the AI or the ALM. So that's why we want to go in deeper. And the personality traits and attitudes and opinions is more about when LM is more considered when LM is applied as a human simulation or as some agents like being used in some widely applications. Then they might be considered or evaluated to see whether they can genuinely or truthfully reflect some humans' behavior or the actions human want. So they all these are belongs to the personality constructs, but have a little bit different emphasis when they consider when we think about when to apply them. So regarding the other cognitive test, so these are a little bit deeper of the two aspects we have just considered. But in this course, we won't go in deeper into that. But if you want to go in deeper, you can feel free to refer to this paper, which has a very great overview of all these topics. And now we want to know more about you. Actually, I have already asked a part of this question. Have you ever taken a psychological test? And also, do you think it can truly reflect who you are? Anyone want to share? This might be a little bit sensitive, but I think we already shared over 50% of our classmates have ever taken these psychological tests. And if any, yeah, great.
Yeah, I have taken the MBTI test. I think it's very common. And for the second question, I don't think it truly reflects who you are. I think it maybe more reflects your perception of yourself and what you think about yourself, but that could be very different from how others might think of you. So I don't think it can truly
affect. Yeah, that's a really great point. I think I agree with you that it might not always truly reflect you regarding at least 2 points. The first one is about what you said, it's more about how you perceive yourself, and then when you get the MBTI's type. And the other one might also be related to the dynamic change of our personality, since many of our friends might find that the MBTI results or some other psychological testing results might change after we grow up and after we being in the different scenarios. So that even though we are using these to testing the humans, there are a lot of dynamics and a lot of uncertainty here let on the LM. So that's also indicate how challenging this problem in the research community as well. So we can see when we want to go in deeper into measuring the values in the generation, we want to cover first of all, what's the definition of values we commonly mention. Values are beliefs that guide behavior and decision-making, reflecting what is important and desirable to an individual or group. So we want to discuss or evaluate the values because it can actually as a latent factor that would finally result in some different behaviors and decision making. So it is important to even predict some of the human and LLM's behavior in the long term or in the real world practice. So that is one key factors we want to keep in mind to know why the value is important and how it will impact the real world human LLM interaction and even larger application scenarios. And here you can see that they cover the different values theories that has been widely investigated in psychology and social science, such as the Schwartz, WVS, etc. Later, we would mention a little bit more here. And usually, when we evaluate the LM with LM, evaluate the values for LM, here is a typical way, but actually there are more ways to do this evaluation. Users usually provide an atom saying how important is the value of helpfulness or some other values like a creativity as a guiding principle in your life. And then they also provide some options about, okay, from 0 to 9, meaning from not important to, of course, very important. And then LM just generate their responses from all the options here. And then another third-party evaluator could rate, okay, the LM is actually considering the strong benevolence orientation or specific like value based on its generation. This is a very typical way of doing this evaluation. And about what values or what value constructs theories we could ground this measurement. Here I covered 5 or some typical theories, but actually, you know, these theories are much more broader and widely, like more than we just covered in this course. The first one, very like commonly used, where I used a lot in my prior research a lot as well, is about the Schwartz theory of basic human values. And the third one is world value surveys. The second one is value survey module, globe, social value orientation. They all have different like features that could be better used in different scenarios. So we can briefly go in deeper into each of these cases. And the first one is about the Schwartz theory of basic values. The key feature here is that Schwartz value is a very globally universal value, where when Schwartz developed these values category and all these value details, he actually had the survey all across the world, covering over, I remember, over 100 countries to gather results. And then he also used some statistical one to get this relationship and this relationship, where you can see that broadly they cover the 4 aspects for higher level values regarding conservation, self-transcendence, openness to change, and self-enhancement. And going one level downward or further, they actually being further divided into 10 motivational values such as simulation, self-direction, and benevolence, etc. And it's very interesting. You can find that this is not just a list of all these values. It's also showing the relationship of the value when they are at the opposite of the degree. And it actually means that they are like the value are actually opposite to some extent. For example, when a human is pursuing a lot of achievement, it is a high probability that he would not care a lot about benevolence. So, you know, there are actually also the locations also see the values relationship a lot. Here's another way of showing the same values, but here, but describe them in different dimensions. You can see the more right means more self-expansion and more anxiety-free value, and more left means that more self-protection and more anxiety-based value, and more upper means that it is more like social how one expresses personal interests and characteristics, and more like lower one means it is more social focused. So personality focused and the social focused. Here's like how the different plots or figures showing different relationship among all these values. And it has even the third lower like level of the value where these 10 higher like motivational values could even be divided into 56 more detailed value as we showing like in previous slides, such as creativity, national security, preserving the public image, etc. So this is the value we have mentioned. Yeah, this is the 56 values that belonging to each of these motivational value. And this figure is actually plotted by statistically investigation results. It's not just from random. They use some like real world human data and done sample and doing the dimensional reduction and mapping them to these two-dimensional plot. And here is some typical ways in psychology or social science, how do they evaluate these Schwartz value? Where commonly two instruments include Schwartz value survey named SVS and the portrait values questionnaire. They just using something about the value and the different Likert. So yeah, this just give you a like basic perception about how these values would be investigated in traditional psychology and social science. Now we want to see more about how this value would be investigated in state-of-the-art LM-based research. So you can see, I would give you two examples here. The first one is named a framework to measuring the contextual value alignment between humans and LM. So basically, pretty much similar to the instruments we just covered in psychology or social science, we also constructed these value form, giving the LM their specific scenario context and also a list of the 56 values we have mentioned in the framework. And also we give the same instrument to both AI and humans to get their responses and the Likert. Then we have some like metrics to measure their alignment to get different degree of alignment. That's why we can see the very beginning, the figure of how human and LM are actually showing align and misalignment for the values performance. The other paper is about value bench, where towards comprehensively evaluating value orientations and understanding of large model. This is a paper published in ACL 2024. So if you want to see some state of the art on evaluating value to generate some benchmark, this is a good paper you can refer to. In this paper, they mentioned not only evaluating the Likert, but also having they designed 3 tasks about these from item to value, value interpretation, and sub-value to value. So you can go in deeper into how they conducted this more comprehensive evaluation method and framework if you're interested. Now we have talked about the first very like widely used value theory. The second one is about word value survey. This specific theory is widely used because nowadays these value surveys are still conducted, and they usually each 4 or 5 years they would conducted a worldwide survey across over 100 countries. So you can see this is their like Wikipedia's page. They started in 1981, and until now they are still doing this from by a non-profit association. And especially like the survey it's a global research project, and they could cover not only different countries, but also different topics that we can know the dynamic change of the human values along the time. Here you can see that these are the main countries they have covered all over the world, including all the continents that human would be active human activities. So, and specifically in this word value survey, they covered different thematic subsections that would be primarily considered in human activities such as the social value, attitudes, and stereotypes, and also happiness and well-being, social capital, trust, organizational membership. These are different aspects that would be commonly discussed or investigated in human society as well. They just actively keep track of these human values change regarding these semantic subsections every 4 to 5 years. And the latest one might be like 2025-ish. The latest is named WVS Wave 8. So you can see that they already like finished the 7 waves and now it's working on the wave of 6. And in these cases, we also want to cover some of the state-of-the-art research that are using the World Value Survey as well. The first one is also published in 2024, where they are exploring large models on cross-cultural value in connection with training methodology. So you can see that given the WVS can cover like a different timeline of the value as well as different cover of the countries of the value. They could generally comparing the LM's value performance regarding different cultural, like basically geographic regions of the world. So that you can see here some of their findings were humans rating from 55 countries and LM predictions from the 55 countries as well. So the second paper, which is also very exciting and interesting, published in this year, ACL 2025. So this paper is very interesting given that they are investigating can language models reason about individualistic human values and preference, which means that they use the World Value Survey's data published worldwide and not only investigate whether LM is aligned with human, but also investigated the capability of how or whether the LM could reason the individuals like the values, so that the behind like motivation or the problem is that if we give the LM with the human's prior behavior or prior value report, whether the LM could capture this specific human's portrait and then predict in the future whether the human would preserve some of the specific value. So this is also a very interesting paper I would encourage to read as well. And here are the 2 typical value theories commonly investigated nowadays. There are also some other value theory also important, but we don't have time to cover in this course, including the value survey modules and the global, which is a data benchmark, and also social value orientation, where they all have different focus on the specific value or specific scenarios. If you're interested or you will need in some of your future research, feel free to refer to them as well. Now we have covered a lot about the values. So we're gonna talk more about the morality in the LM's generation. Until now, any questions here?
I have a question. So basically, when you say like you measure the distance between like LM value and also like human values, what kind of metric do you use?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. Like usually we have like there are different metrics we can cover. Maybe we can use these as an example. So now, given that it also depends on what generation or what outcome you get from the human and the model. If we taking the example of the Likert rating, just the same with the psychology one. So in this paper, we covered like 3 metrics. One, saying that now you have the data from human as each value a specific Likert rating of agree or disagree, and you have also parallelly the LM's generation give the specific Likert for each of the value. The first one is using the alignment rate, means that we consider humans Likert as the ground truth. And then we compare whether the LM are aligned with it, so that it can being transformed into the accuracy, some of the F1 score. So that this is defined as alignment rate one, considering humans Likert rating as the ground truth. The second one is alignment distance. We can actually use different distance metrics. For example, L1 norm or L2 norm, the way is that we can have each human's set of the values, saying we collected 56 values as a vector. So that,
I think it depends on the human responses are measured in like 0 and 1, so like number numeric form.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
what if like the responses are like text?
yes.
When you think of it, you can like probably use like clip embeddings, but I think like the alignment distance is largely depending on like how accurate can the, for example, like the clip capture the information you need.
Yes, exactly. That's a super like insightful question as well. This is a very simple cases that human and just directly report their liquor, which to some extent that is also a limitation. Well, we consider the real world case that human LM might not directly filling a survey in some case. Instead, we usually just interaction or chat with LM, so that most of the case the data are actually multi-turn conversations. So there are I believe it's still like an emerging cases that we want to investigate what's the value is emerged or is appearing to show given the conversation dialogue. One example maybe could be this one. So they are doing something where given I think in short, the answer is that there's no very good or very standard results or methodology doing this. So given the context and the conversation, directly convert this into or extract the values into a specific one. So if you are interested, I think that's a very promising research direction as well. But we also have some initial work that we can consider or refer to. Maybe we can also dive deeper into this paper where they are thinking about having some interpretation, naming that if we given the very random context of the conversation, they could at least doing some interpretation by highlighting which part are talking about the value, and then extract a set of different highlighting spans, that mention value, and then having those interpretations further be converted into some structured value, saying, oh, this set of interpretation are talking about creativity and whether the creativity are positive or negative. There are some ways of doing step by step to explain this, but this is still very underexplored and are encouraged to be further investigated. So that's a very forward-looking question as well. Great. Yes. And more questions? Cool, love this discussion. And we could continue with the morality given a value. And for morality, it's very similar with the value case where we want to firstly define what is morality. It is a categorization of intentions, decisions, and actions into those that are proper or right and those that are improper or wrong, so that we have a relatively more clear, saying polarity of this morality when we consider them. So it is crucial to conduct a moral assessment of LLMs to ensure they are actually ethically deployed and also would have ethical interaction with humans. That's why we want to highlight the morality in this course as well. And we also cover some of the very typical moral theories that are widely used in our research community. The first one is named Moral Foundation Theory, MFT. And also the ethics is a data set published in the last few years and defining issue test, PEW 2013 Global Attitude Survey, etc. They are all very helpful resource and data set that could be used to measure the morality in LMs. I will give you some specific examples so that you have a better perception and understanding. And moral foundation theory is a social psychological theory intended to explain the origins and the variation in human moral reasoning on the basis of innate modular foundation. And it primarily considers 6 aspects. And that's why it is widely used, because it's just 6 and it's very easy to understand, and more importantly, it's a pairwise. So you can see that when they have the moral foundation of care, it has also an opposite one which has harm. And if we consider the fairness, it also has an opposite morality of cheating and loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, etc. So this is special, unique features of the moral foundation theory as well. And then similarly, it is also using some of the constructs that allow the humans to rate and provide their responses. So here the typical measure instruments in psychology for these MFT includes the moral foundation Vignet, the moral foundation questionnaire, the moral foundation FFQ2, and moral foundation dictionaries. So here are all different ways you can measure from humans in the social science or psychology. Similarly, we would consider about how these moral foundation theory are investigated in the current LM's research. So this paper is about exploring and steering the moral compass of large language model. So you can see that they also consider the different aspects of the moral foundation, like the items or the 6 factors such as harm and care, in-group and loyalty, and then they compare with different model, including GPT 4.5, Gemini Pro, like Llama 2, etc. And see that how, and they specifically have a metric to see how well they are actually aligned and performing. So beyond this, we also have more model theories, such as the Kohlberg theory via the defining issues test, the consequential list, then deontological distinction, and this PW global survey as well. So you can feel free to dive deeper into all these theories if you need to dive deeper into the morality of LM. And here, I would invite you to guess about how can we measure the value and morality related characteristics in the LM. I think we actually have covered some of this. We covered about using the Likert rating, and also covered, as we like grade, we have a discussion and Q&A. We covered about how would we like evaluate the chat or the conversations between human and LM. And I would love to see or hear if you have some like more ideas about doing this.
I always have a question. Do they usually use semantic analysis to do something like this? Like classification?
Yeah, it's a very professional question. So you have already some very good NLP background. I think this is actually a very good method to do that. There are already some like, I have read some papers that are using like NLP related framework, like semantic analysis, or even like syntactic analysis as well, or even some embedding similarity analysis, those NLP or linguistic features to capture some of the key topic, for example, how LM is expressing polarized opinions or etc. But for these values, I haven't seen a lot of work on that. So maybe you can consider about some like directions on that. I think there are some challenges here. The first one is about values are very, a lot of value aspects, saying we saw from the Schwartz, they have 56 values. And it is also hard to like having the very accurate mapping from the conversation to the specific value. So there are some like extraction, like we also mentioned, extracting from chat conversations to the specific value. So there are actually multiple steps from what we have as the original data to the final value and their polarity, like agree or disagree. So it will be very exciting to see some like NLP based or linguistic method based like ways or methodology to analyze them. Or if I missed some literature, I would also love you to point to me so that it will be some exciting finding to know that. Yeah.
I guess like there's no way for like except for like the retrieval based. I think one of the stuff that you can do is that you can ask the LM to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So sometimes like the context can be very misleading or very toxic. That will like lead the LM to generate something that it doesn't. So it will like, I mean like it can like do some red teaming, like it can like elicit some very toxic information because you have like a very toxic context.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good one. It is also like there's a way of the adversarial testing so that they especially use some red teaming method to elicit some of the potentially harmful results from the LM. And that's also a very good point, especially if we want to focus on the security and the safety of the LM. And it is also defined as one of the potential like methodology of evaluating the safety related values in the broader community as well. We would like later uncover a systematic like way of what are these methods and how they would be evaluated. And then these are like this one I have ever seen like the adversarial one you can also see later. And for semantic one, I think they are still to some extent not fully explored because semantic we have a lot of different methodology of NLP features, so that it will be exciting to see some systematic framework as well. Great.
Also, I think you can, like, for each question, you can ask different LMs to respond and let human to choose which one do they think is more morally aligned or something, just like the famous website, the LM Arena, like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a very good method. It's also named like having LM as a judge, and then you can have a jury, actually, a committee of different LM, which might represent different groups, saying, for example, female group, male group, some specific experts, and do a majority voting. That is also like a more and more important way, like or like valid way in the emerging research as well. Good point.
She said that self-feeling.
It's different. It's a little bit different. I think the slot filtering is also a novel one, I would say. I didn't see before, so that's also a good one. So that you can probably provide a different context and the specific allow the LM to fill in some slots. Yeah, that's a good one. And then the how to design the context and how to design the position and the context of the slots would be a lot of like space to explore. That's very exciting as well. And this, like what he just mentioned, is LM as a judge, which is using a third party of another LM who has a higher maybe expertise or performance that could judge on some like originally LM's generation. So that is another like paradigm to do this one. So we have like different ways. We have come up with different methodology to do this evaluation. Very cool. Yeah. You do have some new method other than the slots where you want to actually add more on the slots method?
So I just think it's something similar to so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but only for chatbots.
Yes.
So.
Generation models, generative LM. Yeah. Great. Very cool. I think like our discussion and answers actually supplement some of like the typical method I just covered today, and it will be exciting to see you like developing more method as well in the future. So now let's see how the existing research community are actually doing this measurement to evaluate the method, the LM on their psychological testing. Where we covered the 4 key aspects we need to know regarding this measurement, including the test format, the data and the task sources, the prompting strategy, and also model output and the scoring here. First of all, we need to know the test format. And here we have covered that the structure test, which means given just like the psychological instruments, we have different values and ask the LM to select from the Likert rating, such as strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then the LM just give us a specific score, which is we name or classify this as a structured test, which is also commonly used for the generative LM as well. And then open-ended conversation is what you just mentioned. Open-ended conversation where commonly involve the free-form Q&A, the long text generation, and multi-turn dialogue. This is more realistic and more important compared with a Likert, because the Likert rating or the structured test, sometimes it's also hard to validate the structured test is like applicable or actually be kept the same when they are interacting with human. There's actually the Likert results versus their generation, like conversation generations gap between here as well. So that's why open-ended conversation is more important, I would say, than the structured test. And the third one is about agentic simulation, which is exactly what you, like our also classmates mentioned. They have another third-party LM acting as different roles. For example, healthcare expert, public sector experts, and educator, so that the different roles could majority vote to get the specific values performance. And these are very typical 3 methods of the test format. We can probably give you some like existing papers publication that indicating or representing each of these methods. For the structured test one, we have mentioned a lot on this. Here is the specific structured value form we developed, where you can see that we need to provide the vignette, which is also the scenario here, which is healthcare in this specific feature, and then like a specific figure. And then we also provide some of the instruction, what we want the LM to do. And we guide the LM to suppose they are an AI assistant, basically provide them with a specific like scenario and how the LM should act in this scenario. And then we list all these 56 values, ask the LM to generate to what extent they agree or disagree. This is named the structure one. The second one is open-ended conversation, and they are still under exploring. One of the latest works published in ACL 2024 named Value Bench, which we actually also mentioned in the prior research, where you can see that they have this like conversation, and then they use different, like they have the, basically what they did is something like capture the linguistic features or some keywords, or the tokens appeared in some specific lexicon, so that if they see, oh, here's a yes, which largely means that it is like agreeing with a specific value. If that is it is saying not a good idea, it is largely indicating that LM is disagree. But there are still a lot of like space or a lot of like exploration. We need to dive deeper into these linguistic related analysis on conversation or open formed, like open-ended question and generations here. Because, for example, if it is saying not a good idea, it might not saying not a good idea on the value, but also saying not a good idea on something else. You know, there are a lot of like consideration need to be tested on, for example, accuracy, what the specific argument, what the specific objects here. So more research need to be done in this direction. The third one is about agentic simulation, where this is another paper published in iClear 2025. So it's very state of the art, where they actually designing different models as different agents as different roles, and then they use the interplay or the majority vote or some of their collective opinions or generations to decide what's the specific value in this case. And this paper in the specific scenario, and this paper is named Daily Dilemmas, reviewing value preference of LMs with quandaries of daily life. You are very welcome to dive deeper into this cool paper as well. So given this, we also need to know what's the specific data and the task sources when we need to measure the psychometrics of LM. First of all, we would talk about established psychometric inventories, and then human authored and custom curated data as well, and synthesized by AI models. So why we need to care about the data and task sources? Because we already know what's the task for math. We further need to know what data we can use to further evaluate those. So that's why data is a gold, or it's very important to implement what our idea mentioned in the previous section. And here, the three typical one, first, the established inventories would be very easy to be understand because we're just using the psychological instruments, such as the Schwartz-like instruments or some of the existing questionnaires to do that. So these are largely belonging to the established inventories. The second one and third one would be more interested where consider the case that the traditional psychological instruments might not cover all the values or all the cases that we will meet in the future for the complicated real-world scenarios. How could we, in those future unpredicting cases, would we evaluate the value? So that's why we are bringing in these custom curated items and synthetic items. The basic idea is that human or human simulated LM could now doing something like annotation or doing something like data generation to construct those like value instructs to do this evaluation or measurement. So I will give you one example here. So in this paper published in EMLP 2025 this year, where we want to evaluate whether LM's Likert rating would be aligned with their behavior, saying if they're saying I agree with creativity, but when we show the LM with two parallel like activity actions, one is agreeing creativity, the other one is disagree with activities, what would the LM choose from? If so largely we think it would choose from the same with their Likert rating, which is agree with activity, but actually we found a large portion of the disagreement or misalignment between what they claim and what they behave. So if we want to get these data set of the actions, saying the pairwise of agree and disagree on each pair of the values, we actually couldn't find any existing data set that could represent these specific tests that we want. So what we did was that we have a human in the loop LM generation that we generate a new data set and benchmark to empower this environment. So what we did is that we actually have like the two annotator. We first have the LM generation to generate LM models to generate these pairwise about positive action, negative action for each of the values. And then we have two annotator experts to select which prompt would generate the best one given the specific like metric, evaluation metric. Here we have the metric as the accuracy, saying whether the generated action are generally reflecting agreeing or disagreeing with the value. And then now we selected the best prompts for this specific data generation task. We then use the LM to generate the large scale of the data set involving all the values. And then finally, we also have another set of experts to evaluate the final quality of the data set. So this would be, you can see, a combination or collaboration between LM and human experts to generate the value-related data set or benchmark we would need in the future research. Any questions until now? Cool. Then we have talked about the specific test format. We have talked about how to generate the data for the specific test format. Now we need to also cover a little bit about how to design the prompts if we want to evaluate as well as if we want to generate some data. And some typical prompt strategies we could use include the three types. The first one is about prompt perturbation. And the second one is about performance enhanced prompts. The third one is about role playing prompts. They are just different strategies that we could design our prompts to get the best results for the value measurement here. And I will give you one good paper that's showing a good example for how we can design the prompt perturbation. So usually we design our prompt to consist of different aspects. The first one might be the context, saying what's the specific scenarios or what's the specific context that you want LM to be aware of. And the second one would be, okay, given this context, what would be the options you can choose from? And then you would ask the LM to generate this, what's the specific requirement or format, such as you want them to generate a JSON file, or you want them to just generate a TXT file format as well. So that usually our prompt are consisting of different aspects. And if we want to have the like evaluation or the prompting be very robust and convincing, we usually need to perturb different aspects of the prompts, saying we can generate 8 different prompts, all saying the same thing, but have a little bit different nuance. For example, this is how they perturb their different aspects, saying you can reorder them or paraphrase some of them, or just change a little bit different requirements, etc. So that now you want to evaluate the same thing, but you have 8 different variants of your prompts. You just need to average all these 8 prompts results, so that you can have a higher confidence saying that our generation outcome would be more reliable if you in comparing with just giving the LM 1 prompts, because we all know that LM is very sensitive to most of the prompts. So this is one way of making your generation more robust and more consistent. And the second one would be for performance enhanced prompts, where I didn't dive deeper here, but the behind idea is just a chain of thoughts. So that if you want your prompts to have a better performance, you just allow the LM to think step by step, so that the quality will be highly probable with higher performance as well. The third one is about role-playing prompts, which I think is a new strategy here. So this is one paper you can dive deeper into if you want to like try or refer to the role-playing prompts. So that's in this paper about quantifying AI psychology. They just tried different roles when they prompt the LM to evaluate these value. And it shows that the role-playing prompts can significantly change the values performance and their generation. So maybe you want to try these prompt strategy in the future in your own research as well. And now the final part we need to cover for how to measure is about model output and scoring, which I think you also ask the great question in here. The first one is about closed-ended output, which is commonly the Likert, where I think we don't need to cover these too much, because it's just like the scores, the specific different number, and then you can use like F1 score, as we just mentioned, or you can use like L1, L2 norm, the distance as a vector to measure these close-ended outcome. It's more challenge or promising directions to consider open-ended output. And here are 3 ways that prior research has ever did. The first one is about rule-based scoring, saying that if the conversation already shows some typical token or word saying yes, or I agree, or I disagree. So that basically you define some principal rules to extract or analyze the generation. And this is the first typical method. The second one is about model-based scoring. So you can see here, it is likely to use another LM or another judge, like we mentioned, the agentic simulation, or like the LM as a judger to do these model-based scoring. And the third one is, of course, more higher quality and more like convincing, which is involving human in the loop to score this process. And all of them has like different like pros and cons, and it will be exciting to see if you can come up some like new, exciting, efficient, and high reliable metric or method to do this like scoring. Any question or thoughts?
I have a small question.
Yes.
How do they usually plot this kind of like diagrams?
That's a very good one. So I like, this is kind of, I usually like do plots or do this illustration figure with the Keynote, which is the very default PowerPoint with the in the MacBook. And then Keynote usually have some icons that you could change into different color. But for this, some specific one, for example, this one, you need to search on Google. It is not appearing in some existing apps. You need to search on Google saying like AI icon or like library icon, there are some like platform or website, they are hosting different icons.
Do you use flat
Like flight.
icon?
Yeah, that is one. And there are no other like finder icons or finder icons, or there are many platforms or websites, they have different kind of this one. But I would think that these are just elements and some of the, like figures that you can borrow, just like small nuanced elements. The most important of doing this figure is your creativity. Saying how you put them together in a human understanding way. I think that are something, because I collaborated with different like collaborators, I think the creativity is a bottleneck that decide whether the figure is good or not. So that's maybe a good way if you want to training your skills of this, see more figures and then see how they ensemble all the figures together so that you have more templates in your brain. And then furthermore, you know how the element could be found in icon platform, in Keynote, like those elements, etc. So I would be excited to see in your final projects, there will be some good figures. Good. So these are very important skills. Some out of like the topic, I ever read one paper saying that if you want to like publish a top tier conference, how important is the visualization of your paper? And there's some like prior research actually train a classifier. One is a published paper, one is not published paper. They especially like focus on the visualized, elements and like visualized quality. And they found that the top tier conference like visualization is usually much higher than the non-published one. So that is also in some way indicating the importance of making good figures. So yeah, just some jokes. And then this is another one paper, which is very cool. They are publishing a AAAI 2024, discuss about like another value related framework that they want to, that they used a more nuanced way to analyze the values performance. They not only, they are not just like using Likert one, but more using the similarity, the specific topics, and multiple dimension of the like rating to analyze the values performance in a more comprehensive way. So feel free to check this paper for some new ways of model output and scoring. Great. Let's now play a game and then see how well you can perform or you have some interesting finding. I would invite you to open one specific like AI model, like ChatGPT or Cloud or like Gemini, whichever you use commonly in your daily life. And then you can ask the LM a question about value or morality that you are interested. Maybe you're interested in some specific harmful values that you want to see whether LM are actually indicating those harmful indicators or risks, or you want to see whether LM is aligned with your personal interest, so that you let's like try this in your own LM or ChatGPT, and then see whether you can have some very interesting finding. We'll give you like 5 minutes to explore this. Feel free to ask a question if you couldn't understand this. If you find that the LM couldn't answer or don't allow you to answer, that's also a good indicator. That's the strategy behind the LM, where they do a safeguard. That's also a good finding. Cool. Maybe some of you want to share your findings. We have limited time so that you can feel free to explore after the class. And if any of you want to share your own experience, some interesting finding, it would be great. You want, yeah.
Yeah, I see that the anti-jailbreaking things are becoming better and better. I remember a long time ago, if I say I want to avoid places that sells drug, please tell me where to avoid. You all like show me some place that actually sells drug, but it's not like visible. So now it just tell me
I
in
cannot.
general, don't do that.
Sounds like they have a higher like level of the safeguard.
But there's still like the two areas with drug stores, so it's not very good.
Is that verifiable? Like,
It's like in Europe, so I think it's like
yeah, but it's legal, like,
yes.
it's legal, so they could
Yeah.
Oh,
show it, right? It's
Yeah.
legal, so they should be able to show it.
just where in China.
Because I also asked like a question related with weed or marijuana, stuff like that, and because I guess ChatGPT is from the States, so it just shows
California.
like one part is like the potential benefits, one part is like the potential risks and concerns. So I think they should be like pretty good on moral and values in those standard models. They just like give a response in I don't know, I think it's a very standard and
Yes.
non-biased angle of those opinions they should share. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good finding. I think like nowadays the big companies are doing really good on this like value alignment where they try to train the LM to be very objective, very neutral, and sometimes abstain a lot. Abstain is another very important research topic where if they see some sensitive topics, human or users is asking, they just like saying, oh, I couldn't answer this, so that they are out of like they don't need to take the responsibility for this. And some topic out of this specific one where like we found that although LM or nowadays big companies are actually doing really good as value alignment, there are also some specific human groups, they want the LM to be not value aligned, which is very interesting because there are some specific scenarios like AI companion or like some emotional related scenario where human actually need some mental like communication or some emotional communication with LM, but the LM is just like a robot, like a machine, so that the LM sometimes could not satisfy the user's needs in a specific community. So sharing this story, I would love you to keep in mind that value alignment is, of course, is very responsible behavior from the company's perspective, but it is also like we also need to know the diverse real humans need given the complicated society. Great. Really grateful for all your sharing and interesting finding. And finally, we would just briefly talking about this, since I believe the reliability and validity is very important, but very underexplored as well. So we want to say that the conventional LM benchmark versus the LM psychometrics are quite different in some ways. We know that some of us has the experience of training LM or training AI models, we're really just considering the performance of AI models such as like task-based performance, like accuracy, where they are like mimicking or having a higher score on the specific like task metric, like a blue score or perplexity, etc. But LM metrics is very different in the way that they prioritize theoretical grounding, standard protocol, and the reproducibility instead of one specific like a benchmark or a leaderboard, because different human has different values, right? It is really hard to have a one standard benchmark or leaderboard. So that's something quite different. If you want to go deeper into their differences regarding, how many sample size we need, how would the statistical modeling, you can also refer to this table here, but I won't cover going deeper in this course. Feel free to refer to or dive deeper into these slides after our class. And then we also need to know that the psychometric validation of the LM's measurement has two very fundamental principles. The first one is about reliability, and the second one is about validity. And they are also very underexplored and need further attention and investigation in this line of work, and also need humans or researchers to pay attention to the importance of them. And finally, we have some standards and a recommendation from prior work as well. We just mentioned primarily or briefly talk about what does this mean. Reliability means that we need to measure how consistent a test of performance regarding how they can being consistent over the time and how they are consistent across different versions and also among different evaluators. So that when we do, like we also at the very beginning share the case of psychological MBTI cases, even the psychological testing for humans are very diverse and dynamically changed, let alone the evaluation of LM, so that we need to consider how the finding of our psychometric evaluation LM would be consistent among different factors like time, versions, and evaluator. So reliability is a very important consideration we need to take into account. And there are several different ways of doing this evaluation on the reliability, and feel free to refer to this paper where they covered a benchmark that could that touch base the 5 reliability forms, such as how the internal consistency when we do multiple times of prompting, how the consistent among all their different prompting generation, how the different inter-rater reliability, naming that how humans are having consisting among different raters, etc. So they have some specific method to evaluate this reliability. Furthermore, when we consider about validity, it means that assesses whether a test is truly mirrors its intended construct, including various facets like content validity, construct validity, criterion validity, etc. So it means when we do maybe in the future generate our own data set or our own psychological testing instruments, we need to ensure those instrument is valid to reflect the specific value we want to measure. So this is another one. But if we just directly use some traditional psychological surveys or questionnaire, we usually don't need to consider these, because those questionnaires are usually widely be evaluated or validated from prior research. So these metric or dimension of ensuring their validity, we can also probably refer to the traditional psychological or social science research to see when they develop a new framework or new concept, how they use their own method to test this validity as well. So this is also a promising and underexplored direction for LM's psychometric evaluation. And yes, so finally, we also found some papers that give really great recommendation on the future standards, which again showing that this is really underexplored and need more attention for this as well. And that's it. Thank you and wrap up. What's more do you want to say, or what's more do you want to ask? Feel free to ask or comments as well.
We're gonna explore preferences finding in LM.
You mean,
I guess preferences for values are different.
Yes, pretty different. If you still remember, in our prior slides, last time, so we have a table where showing from the preference to the values. The preference is much shallow, where it can be prefer a red tie or a blue tie. do you prefer, you know, these Chinese food or American foods? Those are preference.
I guess by preference alignment, like how can LLM align with the human's preferences?
Yes.
Like not human values. I guess human preferences are more diverse.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think like values is more deeper and preference is more shallow in a way that they are both humans' perspective, but they are reflecting different levels of human behavior. Like preference could be very directly observed, saying if I prefer to go into the office of 7th floor or 6th floor, or if I prefer to travel in Europe or travel in Chinese, you know, those are very like shallow preference, which can be easily or explicitly observed. But value is something more deeper that could potentially decide or influence their preference. So it's more implicit in some way. Yes. Yeah, exactly. But you know, like value is more challenged to collect in a way. That's why we can see like RLHF is reinforcement learning with human feedback. They are collecting just preference. But if we want to collect values, we might need different preference to reflect one value. You know, those are like a different level of thing. And this is a really great question. We also like this year we submitted one like NeurIPS paper, which have a very relatively good score, where we discuss about the deep value and shallow preference. So what we did is that we kind of want to understand the correlation or whether there are some co-finding factors when we trained the LM. The case is that when we train the LM, we really just use shallow preference, saying given a pair of data, ask the LM to choose, do you prefer this one or that one? And these options where the data are usually very shallow description about the human activity, about, you know, some specific one, which is not always reflecting the value. And then if we want to like in our testing time, we actually in the training time correlate the shallow value always with a specific like preference. So that preference A, value A, preference B, value B. And then in our testing time, we decoupled this correlation and see whether the LM is still like doing this pair of like the genuine preference to the value, and they actually learned more about the correlation, but not the true value of the human. So these are like a follow-up of the research, which is a very good point. Preferences and value are very different things, and they need a further investigation to decouple them. Yes. Cool, very good point. And yes, finally, I want to touch base a little bit more on our final projects. As last time, we have some questions asking about what's the format of our final project. It can be very flexible, but I want you to cover at least the key factors regarding doing a research project, where you need to have your introduction, you need to have your related work, which discuss what's the prior research have ever done until state of art. And then you want to propose your own method. And then you want to do some experiments or data analysis, you know, some hands-on things describing what's your experimental setting and what's your results. Finally, you just conclude with several sentences would be good. Any questions here?
Is this for the final also for?
Yeah. It's for, you don't necessarily need to cover all of them in your final proposal. But when you are propose your own final projects, you need to keep in mind in the final report of your final project, you need to cover all of them.
But while we are doing the proposal, you will not sure about some details. So, for example, for the method, obviously, so obviously,
Yeah, you can probably like in your first proposal, you can just cover the first two, because you might already decide what's the very vague research question you want to explore and some of the existing related work. And then in the middle of our like project report, you can probably have a deeper understanding of your method and what's the specific experiments you want to conduct. And then in the end of our semester, you might already have some results and you can add them. So you can also do this step by step, and having this global overview in your mind when you design or propose your final projects. Sounds good? Any more questions regarding any of the, yeah?
Yeah, just to ask again, the project is like a group project, correct?
Yes, it can be a group project. You can have another teammates, like, so the projects could be 1 to 2 people. If you have to do 3 people, it's also fine. Yeah, but up to 3. Sounds good? Awesome, thank you so much. We have done.